Okay, this afternoon I've got Mervyn Sloman from the Book Lounge, which is Cape Town's favorite bookshop. It's a most magical place. So Mervyn, if you'll just excuse me a bit, I just want to give a bit of background. It's on a corner of Baden-Cunt and Rowland Street, and Rowland Street at the top end used to have an infamous jail, which is now the archives. What happened was they moved all the criminals from Rowland Street and put them at the bottom end of Rowland Street in the Houses of Parliament, and there they've been ever since, until the beginning of this year when somebody burnt out Parliament. So maybe we need to take them back to the jail, which is the archives at the moment. Anyway, when you walk into Mervyn's shop, if you were to turn around, you would be faced with the whole edifice of Table Mountain. It just couldn't be a better sight. It is just the most magic place. It has a basement downstairs, which I saw Mervyn describe once as a big hole when he bought or rented. I'm not quite sure, we'll get to that thing at the moment. The place where the Book Lounge now is. Mervyn started this in 2007 after leaving Exclusive Books, which is the big book chain in South Africa, decided to go independent. I suspect that he should really have gone to see a psychiatrist, because I can't imagine anything worse and more challenging than running a bookshop in South Africa. But at any rate, he's done it. He's still there. And not only that, he survived COVID, the bookshop survived COVID, and it has gone from strength to strength. And he's introduced a book festival, which we will get to later as well. Now, Mervyn, when you decided, before we get to the ins and outs of how you buy books and all the rest of it, when you decided that you needed to have your own bookshop and run your own bookshop, why was that? I mean, it seems to be a flight of fancy to do this sort of thing.
Yes, it was probably insane. Although, I mean, yeah, I shouldn't say that, because the fact that we've survived 14 and a half years possibly is testament to the fact that it wasn't entirely insane. I had, as you say, I had been working for Exclusive Books in the trade for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And over that time, I had become progressively convinced that Cape Town could do with another independent bookstore, which did things a little bit differently. I also became increasingly convinced that my sanity required me removing myself from the corporate environment and yeah, taking some risks and just putting together something which, you know, I wanted to do, and as I say, which I felt there was a space for, and part of that was about you know, not being answerable to accountants and bean counters and all that kind of thing about, you know, what books we chose to stock and all that, but also just about creating a space which was a warm and welcoming one, and one in which the hope was that readers and writers could find each other and engage with each other. And also, I mean, obviously central to that was the notion of an independent bookstore needing to be a space which is more than just a retail space which happens to sell books, but it's also a space for conversation, for ideas, for debate. That for me is central to the notion of what an indie bookstore is all about.
No, I mean, you've specialized in book launches. You've had writers from all over the country there for their book launches. You've had international writers there for their book launches. So that was a vibrant part and parcel of your whole concept. I mean, it's been one of the great openings up in Cape Town for books.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was always part of the sort of the initial plan or framework for what I wanted to do. I was very quickly surprised by the number of events that we ended up doing. I never thought that it would be anything like that. When we opened, I was thinking like, you know, we'll do a book launch or a book discussion or a book something, I don't know, once every 2 weeks. or something like that, sort of see how it goes. And it wasn't long before we were doing 3 or 4 events a week, sometimes 5, and saying no to a lot of things. There was also, we had to turn things down partially because there was an integrity, hopefully, about what we were doing. And also only sort of so many days in the week. And it's been a huge loss, obviously, over the last, 2 and a bit years, since the onset of the pandemic. Both in terms of, that there's the loss of income from sales at events, which are very, up and down. But it was a significant source of income for us. But also it's something which became absolutely crucial to the identity of the shop and how people understand us, how people think of us, and that has been very, very difficult, and it's constant. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead and sort of take me back if you want to, but it's an ongoing, very difficult dilemma for us, because we're in a space at the moment where we still have these regulations which are about limiting capacities in indoor events to 50%, blah blah blah, and we have and we, it seems like, I don't know, sometimes it feels like we're the only people anyway who still take that seriously, but we are taking it seriously and we are respecting it. And that's also about, my colleagues here and what we feel comfortable with. And until such time as we can, both safely and legally, host events with unlimited capacity again, I just don't think we're going to go there.
Yeah, because one of the things that you've lost have been the children's reading on a Saturday morning. Is that not so? I mean, that must have been a great addition to the bookshop and something that was desperately needed, I always thought.
Yeah, it was I used to say to people sometimes that it was my favorite time of the week at work was a Saturday morning, watching group of kids being entertained and engaged around books, because I think that's incredibly important. And yeah, it's something else that's disappeared from what we do and who we are, and I hope it'll come back one day, but who the hell knows.
Well, there's a bit of luck it'll come back sooner rather than later, but then I'm always the optimist. But now, Mervyn, when you set out, how did you know what books you wanted to sell? And I've heard you talk about this, but it would be interesting to hear you talk again. There are all the bestsellers that the chains stock up in great big piles, but that didn't work for you. Now, why do you think that happened?
It was interesting. I mean, so when we opened, we had a certain amount of money that was, sort of in the budget for spending on kind of opening orders. I make that sound more organized than it was. I actually had no clue how much money we had to spend, but I knew that we couldn't spend very much. And when we sat doing those orders with reps from the different publishers, what we were doing was selecting a smattering of books that I knew, and my colleagues who had also worked in exclusive books knew were sort of surefire sellers, and then building around that with the kinds of books which we were more interested in, which we thought, which we wanted to have in the shop, the kinds of books that we wanted to put into people's hands. Whether they were short story collections or poetry or obscure novels or what have you. And what we found was that what we knew from our years in the book trade could be put in a paper bag and chucked in the bin, because we, James Patterson, to give one example, we couldn't give it away. The
I'm not surprised, but anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you walk into an exclusive books now, and there's a new James Patterson out. Or any time of year you can walk in, there'll be a new James Patterson out, because he and his cronies publish, I don't know, about 25 new books a year with his name on them. And perhaps that's not a great example, but people were interested in what we were doing and coming to us not for the books that they could walk into exclusive books and find a massive pile on. As we've been here, for a bit of time over the years, there was maybe a little bit of a shift in that narrative. And that we possibly became a little bit more commercial in terms of some of the things that we stock. But there still is a big disjuncture there between what sells in the rest of the trade and what sells here. And we still don't stock James Patterson. It's just, we cannot sell the bastard, except every now and then a library kind of, does its best to make us feel suicidal by sending through an order for 3 James Pattersons and 4 Danielle Steeles, which we then just go, fuck, all right, we have to. No, we're not book snobs at all. Don't have any element of snobbery here.
But now, how did you know? What was it? Just what books that you liked, what books your staff liked, and that was what you were going to sell? Is that what had happened? And then, I mean, how did you market that?
Well, if you're gonna do something completely what you have called insane, which I have differed with, it's absolutely sane, an open independent bookstore. So part of the thing was putting a team together of people, and initially it was a very small team. There were 4 of us. Of people who are also passionate about books, passionate about book selling, which is also important. It's different to being passionate about books. And you have to back yourselves, because otherwise, why are you doing this? So you go, yeah, this is something I love. It's going to be in the store, and sort of the people who started the shop with me, same thing. Also, look, I mean, you build up, when you're working in the trade for a while, you build up a lot of knowledge, and it's not just about what you've read; it's about understanding how different kinds of things that get published, and what is interesting to different people. And so we tried to go as broad as possible. And that has remained the model in a way, that we order as wide a range of books as possible, so we don't tend to order massive quantities of things, and we order and reorder very, very quickly as we sell books. There's a much higher proportion. There's a much higher proportion in the shop of books where we keep a single copy, and when we sell it, we reorder it, than you will find in most bookshops, and certainly in chain bookstores.
So you're not returning a stock of books after 6 weeks or 2 months?
We do return, but certainly not after 6 weeks or 2 months. So different publishers have got different terms and stuff like that, and some of that gets negotiated, in a sub when you do the order. Whereas others, it's a sort of standard thing in place. With the bigger publishers, the corporate publishers, you've got a year you can return stock up to a year from when you bought it, when it was invoiced out to you. And we do returns, and certainly that's on, most of that is on newer stuff where reps are offering you stuff, they're pushing stuff onto you. This book is this new book which is going to absolutely blow you away. It's by an unknown author, but they're every bit as good as Mike Nichol, and you're taking this person's word for it.
Bad comparison.
You're terrible, but yeah, because nobody's like Mike Nichol. But so you order 5 copies, and you go, or you order 3 copies, and then maybe one of us reads it, and we go, what were those publishing marketing people talking about? It's nothing like Mike Nichol. 6 months later, 8 months later, okay, dear playing around in my house, John on the ball, Pam McMillan, whoever, yeah, please have this back. So yeah, no, we do definitely do returns.
All right, Mervyn, then once reps are coming around and offering you these books and saying you must buy that, and you do buy it. Once you've bought a book, what happens to it then? Okay, it goes onto a shelf, but how do you determine what books you're going to put in the window, what books you're going to leave on the shelf, or how do you make that decision?
Sure, tricky. What goes in the window is, different people do the window displays at different times, and nothing else to do. It hasn't changed for a couple of days. They'll do it, and sometimes it's just like personal taste. The only thing that I will say about what goes in the windows is one very hard and fast rule, and that is it has to be a book with a hardback, not a paperback, because sun damage, paperbacks get murdered in 3 hours in the sun. So flaps just go like that. In terms of sort of displays and stuff like that, it's mostly built around new things, but with occasional, if somebody feels like putting something out on display somewhere, it's a book that they loved, feels like it's not getting the attention it deserves, slap it on a table. There's no hard and fast rule, there's no formula. Yeah.
Now, you have a website. I mean, the Book Lounge has a website, and you and your staff are recommending books there all the time. Is that a useful marketing tool for you, and does it sell books?
Yeah, look, I mean, the part of what this place is built on is around curation and recommendation. And sometimes that has some kind of immediate response, and sometimes it doesn't. And one isn't always clear. The response isn't necessarily evident, or the impact of it, I should say, isn't necessarily evident. And there are numerous occasions where I've happened to be on the few times where I actually find myself at the counter or on the floor and talking to customers, somebody will mention something that I saw this in your newsletter 3 months ago. It was written by somebody, I can't remember their name. It definitely had a green cover, and it might have had something to do with somebody who was once in Mexico. And I go, yes, of course, I know exactly what it is, or not. So a lot of the stuff that we do because we have to do, but you don't necessarily see those imminent those results. Sometimes you do, and then so every now and then we do a book of the week special or a pre-order on something or what have you. I've actually just decided today to do something with a book that's coming in about 10 days time, which I'm excited is not the right word. It's harrowing, but I think it's an incredibly important book. And yeah, we'll promote it. We'll put it in our weekly mail. We'll do a 20% off for a week. Blah 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 blah, and see what we can do. Yeah.
All right. Now, in the happy times when you're able to have book launches and so on, how important is that event for you?
Look, when you do as many events as we were doing, different events are completely different. Some events are incredibly important from a financial point of view. If we can sell, 50 copies of a book, that's absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't happen very often. There's sometimes occasionally you sell 100 copies of a book. That's just okay, let's all just pack up and spend the week on the beach or something. No, not really. But yeah, so an event can be important to us because we sell a lot of books, right? And because we need money and we need to pay salaries and rent and all that shit. A book can also, an event can also be really important to us because there's a really, really important conversation that happens at the event, which sparks other conversations in other spaces. And that, for me is, and if I hear about it, then that's absolutely fantastic, and makes me very happy. When we started, I mean, there was very limited space for sort of public conversations of the kind that can happen at book events in Cape Town, certainly in the city. There were conversations happening in sort of academic institutions or academic environments, if you like. There were other, conversations happening in different places. But I mean, one of the things that we've always tried to do is sort of, as much as possible, is sort of democratize the space here. It sounds a bit whatever, but God knows how many times over the years people have said to me, "Why don't you charge for events?" And we're like, no. That's a complete anathema to what we are trying to do. If you're saying that the conversations that come out of events are important, then crucially you cannot then limit that conversation to people who are wealthy, who have disposable income and are happy to pay for whatever. Diversity in terms of diversity is an overused word in this country, but diversity in terms of diversity of opinions and frameworks and blah 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 blah. That's incredibly important to any conversation. And the minute you're putting a sort of financial ring fence around that, you lose a hell of a lot. Not sure that I've answered your question. I've been rambling. Sorry.
But it does. The other thing, once you're talking about that and talking about this event, things being discussed at these book launches, is there any way that moves off into the media at all? Or is that just a no-no these days?
Very occasionally. And I think that, there have been some things which have happened here which have found their way into the media, but those I think have tended to be where there's for want of a better word, celebrity type, political celebrity type person who is either launching a book or participating in a conversation or something like that. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of examples. Way back when she was politically relevant, Mampela Rampele. At the time that she was launching whatever it was called, I can't remember. We're brain dead. Her political party. We did a book launch with her around that time, and it was 6 months after she'd said on stage at Open Book that she will never get involved in party politics. So there were a couple of journalists around there. There was something newsworthy around that, and because she said something quite different to what she said before, and blah 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 blah. So there've been a few examples of that kind of thing. But in terms of literary conversations, for want of a better word, going from the stage to the page, not much.
Okay, so they're mostly events about themselves and about readers who come in to listen to them. Now, you talked a bit about money and charging for events. Do the publishers help you out with the wine or the snacks or whatever it is?
So the wine, we've had a wine sponsorship from Leopard's Leap from, I don't know, very, very early on in terms of doing events. And they were always very generous about that and gave us, unlimited amounts of wine for the events. If and when we start doing events again, we'll need to, see if we can get them back on board, or if not, somebody else. In terms of the snacks, this is a tricky one. How much? Okay, let's go with full disclosure. Okay. And I can get myself into trouble here.
I don't want you to get into trouble, so if you'd rather not...
It's fine. Who's going to fire me? I might create some problems for ourselves going on, but anyway. There was how shall I put it, a flexible approach to this, okay? So the bigger publishers who, in my mind, have got more money floating around, they would make a certain contribution towards the cost of the food, right?
Yeah.
We didn't get outside caterers in, so we did it ourselves. When I say us, not me, me making food, so we kept it simple, and different staff members at different times took responsibility for that. Go up the road, buy the stuff, prep it here in the afternoon. There were, and then sort of smaller publishers, self-published. If somebody had money and they could contribute, great. And if they didn't, and if it was something that we felt was an important book and we wanted to host the event, then they didn't contribute at all. And there were a lot of events like that. There were also times where we went to one of the bigger corporates and they went, no, we don't have budget for this. And we went, okay, we'll just do it ourselves anyway. So because, and I mean, I remember absolutely insane policy, if you like. This was in early days of doing events. So when did we open? 2007, I think.
2007, yeah.
Yeah. So this is probably that sort of period for a few years. One of the big publishers had a policy in place whereby, because they have marketing departments and publicity and whatever, and they have budgets that they set up, and they have budgets that get allocated to each new book, and they specifically excluded any budget for a launch from any debut novelists. And it was like, okay, so somebody who has written 4 books, we will pay for a launch. Somebody who we've agreed to publish their first book, nobody knows anything about them except their buddies, we're not going to pay for a launch. And I was like, I was like, that's upside down. The debut novelist is a person who needs the support more than the person who's written 4 novels, unless they're one of these people who knows 25,000 people who are all going to buy their book anyway. Anyway, that changed. I think I had enough moaning about that over 4 or 5 years, and then it did change. But very long answer to a simple question.
It wasn't a simple question. It was fascinating. Thank you. I've always wondered who pays for the Simba chips from down the road. But anyway.
Simba chips? No, Mike. No. You don't get Simba chips at the book lounge.
Mervyn, what can writers do to actually help sell their own books?
Well, firstly, tell everybody they know. So if we stock their book, tell everybody they know to get it from us. The whole sort of arena of marketing is such a difficult one. I think it's a really difficult one in the book trade. I think that people who are working in that side are struggling and have been struggling for a number of years, because essentially what you're doing is you're trying to get attention for this book that you've published, right? And if you rewind, I don't know, say 20 years ago, I mean, I think that there was pretty much a standard template, which was around, okay, we're publishing a new book, and that this would be the publisher. We need to send a copy of the book to these, I don't know, 10 book journalists around the country, and really hope that however many of them decide to read the book and publish a review, and hope that the review is positive, and then there's a review in the Cape Times or the Sunday Times or both or whatever, or somebody on radio and that kind of thing. And that has all but disappeared. And I mean, I know there are people who still hold store and buy that and get very upset about the fact that, oh, my book wasn't reviewed anywhere in the South African media. And I mean, my response to that is always, yeah, there's very little space for it, but even if it does, it makes bugger all difference. I think I don't know if the Cape Times still has a book page. They might do. Does anybody read the Cape Times?
Exactly.
I hope not. You know, so, and even when it was different, it had minimal impact. So it is about, it's a very, very difficult thing. And I think publishers who are honest will say to you that they are really, really struggling with this, and they have been for quite some time. We're inundated with information on whatever sort of digital platform, whether it's, you know, just sort of online in terms of the internet, or whether it's social media, whichever, you know, platform or platforms you consume or participate in or whatever, and to try and, you know, garner attention on Instagram or on Twitter or whatever, I think is a very, very difficult thing. You know, I mean, I would, in a way, and I mean, to go back to my, you know, the thing I said right at the beginning, you know, which I wasn't actually being facetious, not really. It's like, me at the book lounge, you writer, what can you do? It really is tell everybody you know that you've got a new book out and they can get it from the book lounge. That really is actually the most useful thing. And we've had, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there are not a lot, but there are examples of you know, some self-published books which you know, we've done pretty well with, and we haven't done pretty well with because anybody here is passionate about them. We've done pretty well because the author has done a good job of getting the word out and mentioning us while getting the word out. You know, I mean, I'm curious to actually flip the question over to you, Mike, in a way, if I may, and you can ignore me if you like. But I mean, you published a novel, Hammerman, a few months ago. I think it came out in February or March, whatever. Wonderful novel. You've been with the Musi, Penguin Random House, for quite some time now. When you publish a new book, is there a conversation that they have with you? And I'm not pointing fingers at them. I'm curious. Is there a conversation that they have with you where they go, "This is our marketing plan for the book. This is what we're going to do, and maybe this is what we'd like you to do as well, or not?" Or, I don't know. Does that conversation happen?
Now you want to get me into trouble, I guess.
Revenge. Feel free to call the question.
There's nothing hard and fast about it, and nobody actually comes and says to me, "Why did you write this book? Why did you bring that stuff in? What do you mean by having done this, that, or the other thing?" So the questions that I would expect to be asked are never asked, and I end up sometimes they'll send me, because Penguin Random House has its own magazine, online magazine, they'll send some questions. I will rearrange those questions and answer the way that I want to answer them in order to put out the information that I think should be put out. Now, that's just me. It's not, and I don't know about marketing. So this is just me, the author, thinking this is what needs to go out there. So I think that there is a marketing issue which is not being addressed. And just to get back to another point of yours with the debut novelist, I feel that's where the book launch could be the most successful, because it's going to get packed out by family and friends and all the rest of it. The more books you publish, it seems to me the smaller and smaller gets the reader, that gets the attendance at a book launch. Because why? They've heard you before. Why do they want to hear you again? And so it's a new book. I can pick it up whenever I want to. So for me, the whole thing is inverse. The big audience is going to be the debut thing. The small audience is going to be the well-established writer, unless they're international, in which case then the inferiority complex in South Africa kicks in and you have a lot of people. But and I'm not cynical about this at all, of course.
Of course not, Mike.
It isn't what I think it should be, and which then brings me to the next important thing that I think you did, and incredibly soon after opening the bookshop was to launch the Open Book Festival in 2011. Now, you know, I mean, that was crazy to sort of suddenly think you could go from a bookshop into a festival like that one, with a host of international writers that you had to bring in, and the locals. I mean, that seemed to me to have been madness personified.
No, not at all. You're wrong, Mike.
I'm pleased to hear that. It's been so successful, so obviously I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was the easiest thing in the world to do.
Especially you had Frankie Murray with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Frankie is a machine. Well, a machine with feelings. Yeah, I mean, at the time, it felt like a logical extension of what we were doing, right? And if I go back to you know, what I said earlier, is that, you know, when I opened the shop, doing events was, you know, crucial part of the plan, and you know, what I thought a good bookshop should be doing. But I never expected the number of events, the quantity of events that we would end up doing, and the extent to which we were drawing crowds, and the hunger for events and book discussions. And so, you know, that it was quick. It was, I mean, I don't know, I think the shop had been going for about 2 years or 3 years or something. But it did feel like a very, very logical next step. It was in a time where book festivals around the world were expanding rapidly. I think a couple of years after that, I mean, I don't necessarily like looking at the UK or anywhere else overseas as a sort of reference point, but just as an example, I mean, there was, I can't remember the figures, but there was like a literary festival in the UK just about every bloody weekend of the year. You couldn't sort of, you know, drive 20 kilometers without bumping into a bunch of bloody writers and readers engaging with each other. And we didn't have that. You know, we had Franchuk, which had been going for a few years by then, which is a completely different beast. There's a very big difference between a festival which is primarily a destination venue where people, you know, go for a weekend, or in some cases maybe driving out for the day or something, and a festival in an urban space in the city where you can, you know, sort of pop in for one event, you know, from work in your lunch hour or whatever. And that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a festival that was grounded in the urban space, a festival that was in people's lives, that was relevant in that way. And yeah, so that's what we did. Ben Williams I brought Ben in as a sort of initial sort of partner with me, and then about a few months into our planning for the first festival, he was in charge of it was called Book.coza at that point, which then became Book SA, which he then sold to Times Media and became Books Live, and he moved to Joburg and whatever. So he fell out the picture very quickly. And I'd also set it up initially as a partnership with the Hay Festival in the UK, because they were busy sort of expanding around the world and doing all sorts of satellite festivals, and I thought that would be a useful thing for us to I don't know, kind of piggyback on, and I was totally wrong about that. So we ditched them 3 months before the first festival. So yeah, it was a ride, but yeah, we pulled it off. Frankie, as you mentioned, she was on board from day one, or day minus 100. Yeah, I'm without wanting to sound, I don't know, arrogant or anything. I'm very proud of what we achieved with that festival. I think it the comment that a number of people made at different points over the 9 years that it ran before COVID was about, there were all sorts of different things that people said, but one of the things that really meant a lot to me was they felt it created a vision of what a different Cape Town could be.
All right, now that was the next point that I wanted to get to, because it opened up the writership in this country hugely, for Cape Town at any rate, but nationally. I mean, Black writers who had never been heard of in Cape Town were suddenly on stage and talking to an audience.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen out at Franschhoek for reasons that you've already explained. But what you managed to do with Open Book was to bring in a whole lot of writers who were on the margins in those days, still are to a degree, but it's changing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the focus of what we were doing from day one. And we were, to a large extent, at odds with the publishing industry in this country, unfortunately. And there've been, I think, as you just alluded to, there have been changes in the publishing industry in terms of who gets published and how they get published, but not enough, not close to enough. It's an industry which is still, there are people trying very hard to make changes, but as a whole, viewed with a sort of I don't know, microscope or something from afar, it is still a very conservative and very white dominated industry, completely out of kilter with the demographics of the country.
You see, I mean, my feeling is that the publishing industry is about 10 years behind where the writers are. And there are manuscripts that I see coming through from people who won't get published, but who should be published. And I just think it's a matter of the publishers catching up, but it's also a matter of the market catching up.
Mike, you're leading there into the thing that I must have said this 150,000 times, and I get so bored with saying this.
We'll say it again anyhow.
But if you as a publisher are moaning about the size of the book buying market in South Africa, or the smallness of the industry, or whichever sort of framework you happen to use, and at the same time your publishing output is very similar to what you were publishing 10 or 15 years ago, then if you don't go ping, there's a connection between those two things, then you should really get the hell out of the job, and you cannot you cannot go, the market needs to catch up if you are not publishing new, young, interesting writers in a completely different way to how you published them before, or to what you were publishing before. There is a demand. There are young Black readers who want to read Black writers, who want to see themselves reflected on the page. They want to see themselves reflected in front of an audience, in terms of the person who has the microphone, who is talking about their work, which is in print. And that is a big demand. And to be fair, I'm not having a go at the individual people sitting in, publisher A here, publisher B here, because it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not their fault. They're just the wrong people. I'm not the right person to publish young Black writers. I can read their books and I can appreciate them and I can sell them, but I'm not the publisher. And we are, I think we're at a point where we need completely different people making those decisions. And I'm different people in terms of race, in terms of all sorts of demographics, age, whatever. But I mean, it's not like there's a bunch of people queuing up for those jobs either, as far as I know. I don't know. But it is, somebody made a comment, again, 10 years ago, that the publishing industry in this country, the publishing industry in this country needs to be transformed completely. Two, the publishing industry in this country cannot transform itself. And I see very little evidence to argue with that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, apart from you feeling this way, are you getting this feeling from people who come into the bookshop as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, you can have that conversation with people, and the demographics of people buying books here is quite varied, we have plenty of customers who look like me and were born the same time as me, and it's not an issue for them. They're more interested in what's coming out of the UK or what's coming out of the States or whatever. But there is a really, really important younger market and it's not just younger Black people, it's younger people across the spectrum who are really, really interested in the work of Mohale Mashiko, of Koleka Patuma, etc., etc., and they want to see more. They really want to see more.
Advice to writers right now, then?
I'd write the best books you can. I advise to writers in what context? In terms of selling or in terms of what?
No, but just in terms of, there are some writers who just don't want to engage with the country at all. They try to avoid the setting. They try to avoid the politics, the way we live, and all the rest of it. I happen to think that that's completely wrong, but then that's me. And I also subscribe to the theory of don't write what you know. Write what you don't know. So
isn't there a bit of a contradiction? Isn't there a bit of a contradiction between those two things? On the one hand, you're saying to people, you've got to write your country or you've got to write your city, but you're also saying write what you don't know. Yes,
because some of us don't live in circumstances where others live. So I don't live in a shack, but why can't I imagine or try to imagine or speak to people who do and then pull that experience into my novel?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a bunch of different, issues which are very difficult. And on the one hand, there's I'm very reluctant to walk into the boat of telling writers what to write. Okay, I think that different people have got different things that they're interested in, and they've got different ways of expressing themselves and different subject matter, and I think that that's fine. I think I would find it slightly odd for South African writers to go expressly, I'm not interested in writing about South Africa or writing in South Africa. I would question why. And I'd be interested in what that was about. I do know of the odd occasion where where a South African writer has told their story, shifted the locale of their story to somewhere overseas, because I thought it would increase the chances of getting published overseas. The extent to which that works, and I don't think that's I don't think that's real. I don't think it's a valid argument, but I know there are writers who've done that. And then in terms of the other point that you made about, you didn't use the word "you're right," but let's go there. You're right to write about the shack dweller, somebody else's experience. There's been a lot of talk over the last decade or so about appropriation and who has the right to write which stories and all that stuff, and everybody's familiar with that. My take on it is that firstly, I go back to the thing, everybody's got the right to write whatever they want. The second thing that I would say about it, and it's difficult, is that there's a publishing context, okay? And there's a publishing context into which one is publishing, okay? And I'll give an example of what I'm talking about. Fees Must Fall. So there was a novel, and I'm not going to name it. A novel which came out, which wasn't completely about the Fees Must Fall movement, but it was certainly engaging with it, and certain tertiary institutions, or tertiary institution in South Africa, written by a white writer. I think that there were maybe 5 main characters, 4 of them were black. That book got some people very angry, okay? And I think that and if you unpack it a little bit, the anger was not about that particular writer writing that story in the way they did. The anger was about the South African publishing industry as a whole. This was the only book, the only novel that was set in or engaged with the Fees Must Fall movement, which was a movement which was probably 97% black. This was the only novel which came out of the industry, which then presupposes that there were a bunch of other manuscripts written by black writers which were not deemed worthy of publishing. I have no idea whether that's true or not, but that's how people respond to it, and it's difficult to. So you're kind of looking at a book, and you're responding to the book not actually because of that book or that writer, but you're responding to it in the context of the publishing industry and what's being put out. If that makes any sense.
It does. Thank you. One last question. Thank you for your time this afternoon. One of the things that always pleases me is when I can go in and sign a book, because then I know that it's been despoiled and you have to sell it. Is that the case?
In theory. Okay, so you asked about returns earlier. To give a little bit more detail to the thing about returns, returns being when we as a bookshop return books to a publisher and they credit our account for what we've returned. What I'm going to say is very, very sad, and I cannot believe that I work in an industry which works like this. There are some publishers, and they tend to be smaller publishers. When you return books, so there's a process. You have to have bought it on a sale or return basis in the first place, and then when you want to return it, you do a returns request. They have to authorize it. You send the books back at your own expense to that publisher or their warehouse or their distributor or what have you. They unpack the books, they check, blah, 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 and then they credit your account. Now, there are some publishers, as I say, generally smaller publishers, who are hell of a finicky about the condition of that book, because they then have to, next time somebody orders that book, they're then going to supply it to another bookstore. And I understand and respect that completely. It's frustrating because if a book sits on our shelves for 10 months, it's going to be a little bit bedraggled or whatever. But I understand that. Far better than, I think it is just about all the, okay, I need to be careful here. It may not be all the big publishers, but the bigger household names. The books that we send back, which we have bought on a sale or return basis, when they process those returns, they scan the barcodes so they know what we've returned and goes into the so they know what to credit us for, and those books get pulped. So in some cases, perhaps something else happens to them and they go to, I don't know, they get sold for 50 cents each to, I don't know where. But for the most part, they get pulped. So in theory, I shouldn't be able to send a copy of Hammerman back to the publisher, which has been signed. But if I wanted to, which of course I wouldn't, because I would never return a book written by Mike Nichol, but if I did and you had signed it, and it was one of 100 books that were going back, nobody would know, because that book is about to suffer a book death.
Okay.
And in a country with our reading requirements and the cost of books, the fact that thousands and thousands and thousands of books just get pulped, I think it is bloody criminal.
It is actually. I didn't realize it was as bad as that, but it is actually criminal when they could send those books out to 1 million different places.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, that's not a nice note to end this thing on.
No. Okay, I'll give you one last comment, which will be a nicer note. You asked me a couple of times about advice to authors and what authors can do. And the one obvious thing, okay, and I'm speaking just on behalf of the Book Lounge here, which I should have mentioned, which I didn't, which was really remiss of me. And that is that people should take a leaf out of your book and actually write the Book Lounge into their books, okay? Because it just makes me feel great, and it's a great talking point, and I can say to people, hey, and we're in here as well. So that's very, very important. I think you should tell a lot of people, all your students, that they need to find ways to write the Book Lounge in. Hello, Carnita.
She's done it.
Exactly. That, you see, that's why I say hello to her. You know, if she hadn't, I wouldn't speak to her. You know.
All right. There's some comments that have come in. I don't know if you can see them, but here's to a better ending. The Book Lounge is the best. Nothing better. This is too sad to end on. Thank you for the happier ending, and thanks for your time and for the honesty. Does anybody have a question? Now's the time to get hold of Mervyn, because he's going to go away and you won't be able to contact him because he'll be in amongst the stacks, going off to buy Simba chips for the next book launch.
Mike, why this obsession with Simba chips? We only do Lays.
Because I hate Simba chips.
Is it a taste or a brand issue?
Both.
Okay, good to know. Note to self: Mike Nichol's next launch. Check the chips.
Well, I hope you have it soon enough. Anyhow,
God, so do I.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's lots of thanks coming in. I'm sure if you look, you can see them. So thank you for your time this afternoon and for saying everything that you did. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Mervyn.
Okay.
Bye now.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thanks, Dominique.